Ready?
Heck yeah. Have you ever done an interview, a walking talk with a GoPro selfie stick
No.
and lav mics before?
No, never.
You
I've done
haven't?
a lot of interviews with lav mics, but I've never done a walk. And I've never.
Who are you, by the way?
I'm
Why
Sally
do
Rubin.
people care about you?
I don't know why people care about me. Hopefully, people care about my films.
There you go.
I'm Sally Rubin. I teach documentary at Chapman University, and I'm a filmmaker,
Heck yeah.
documentary filmmaker.
And how long have you been documenting?
I started documenting when I was, gosh, I guess about 12.
Okay.
It was 1989, and my dad brought home a Hi8 video camera. It looked great. It actually had sort of a film look.
Is that like
And
4:3 aspect ratio? Like,
yeah, oh yeah, totally.
Yeah.
4:3. Yeah, in fact, some of it's in the Last Mountain. That
Really?
footage that's in the living room.
Okay.
Where we're all,
Oh, yeah, yeah,
Dad's
yeah.
wanting us to go hiking.
Yeah.
Sal, why don't you want to go?
It's cold out and it's not fun to walk.
Yeah.
That was that very camera.
Okay.
And so he brought home that camera and I started using it.
It's funny how like those types of cameras now are almost like it's like
Right.
the look now.
Yeah,
like you know
totally.
the classic, like a lot of ads now, they
Yeah.
add the like Super 8 thing on the
Yeah,
side. That's
yeah.
like the trend now.
It is funny. I mean,
my
we tried so
gosh.
hard to move away from it.
Yeah.
And now it's what everyone wants. But
Hilarious.
it was a great format. And for me, you know, I was a 12-year-old kid. I was creative. I was curious about people. I think I had somewhat of a visual eye. I've never felt super visual, but you know, the video camera allowed me to basically be nosy in the way that I wanted to be.
Yeah.
Go up to people with the camera, ask them about their stories, their lives, and
So it was about people.
yeah, I think it was really my interest in people. I've always thought of myself as, you know, I could have been very happy being like a visual ethnographer, a visual anthropologist. In some ways, I think of documentary that way.
Yeah.
But that's what you're really doing, is studying people through a video camera.
It's interesting how a lot of people, like some people get into, like I got into doc because of this, because of
Yeah.
GoPros.
Oh, wow.
And the
Through the
visual,
technology.
yeah, the tech
Yeah.
and the like skiing looks cool and
Yeah.
less the people.
Yeah.
But the more that I've gotten into it, the more it's became
Yeah.
about the people and less about, like,
Right.
I don't want to have, like, I'd rather have like a GoPro and an
Yeah.
easy setup than like focus on like making it look insane.
Yeah.
Because I've done that before, you know?
Yeah.
And I think you kind of get over that once you use a red a couple times and
Right,
you like
yeah, exactly.
do that, then you realize that it's more about
Yeah.
the stories and stuff, at least for
Yeah.
me. But
Yeah, and that's fine. That's sort of an entree. I do think that one thing that all documentary filmmakers, students, professionals alike,
Yeah.
myself included, share is a real curiosity about people. If you're not curious about people, you're going to get bored pretty fast,
Yeah.
you know? And I never did anything else. I did documentary all through college, went to documentary film school.
At Tufts.
I just never did
Tufts?
anything else. Yeah, at Tufts.
And did you go there? So your dad was a professor there?
Yeah.
And did you go there because of him?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't really have a choice. I could go there for free, so
Oh, there you go.
yeah.
And that was in
That's where I went.
Massachusetts.
Yeah, that was in Boston.
And what was it like going to? So you're not from Boston. You're from where in Massachusetts?
Newton, which
Okay.
is right outside Boston.
Okay. So how was it weird, like being close to home,
Yeah.
especially after like the circumstances that happened when you were a teenager?
That was weird because I had just turned 18 when my dad died, like a couple weeks earlier. And I was supposed to be starting at Tufts, the college where he taught,
Yeah.
and I had grown up on that campus as a little tyke. So I started a couple months there as a freshman, a couple months later after he died, and all of his colleagues were there, and all of the buildings that I spent my childhood running around in, and the campus that I so associated with him, but he wasn't there.
Yeah.
It was like this kind of living in the land of ghosts.
Yeah,
so
that's
in
weird.
a way it was good because all of his colleagues and our family friends, many of them were professors there also, and they kind of could shepherd me, you know, into my time there.
Yeah.
But it was also difficult.
Okay. And so did it felt like there was some like an empty, like a void when you were always there?
Yeah, it
Okay.
definitely felt, yeah, it did feel sort of how could I find my own place and make my own place
Yeah.
on this campus that had been so closely associated with my dad. And I think, again, in some ways, that's what documentary film gave me from an early age, was just this sense of identity. It was so
Okay.
different from what my dad had done. He was a negotiation social psychologist professor. I did something that was visual, which
Yeah.
was film.
And you said you kind of lacked identity before finding documentary.
Did it go off?
No, it's on.
Oh, it does that anyway. Okay.
So the screen turns off the
Being
same battery.
micromanaged.
Well, we were saying earlier, which is kind of funny, is so she's the head of the documentary department at Chapman, and I'm a documentary student at Chapman, and she's like my professor. It's just funny for me showing up, not the pressure, but in a way it's like, okay, I need to be like on time, which is early, which I wasn't, and then and then I have to have all the gear prepared and make sure like I have
Yeah.
the like questions like relatively dialed and stuff, just because I know
Well,
what you're expecting.
You're learning. You're a student.
Yeah.
Plus, technically, you're way better than I've ever been as far as a shooter and editor.
Why do you say that?
I mean, I think I'm a decent editor, but I've never considered myself that tech savvy. And
Okay.
yeah, at the time that I was learning docs and going to film school, we didn't have sexy cameras. We didn't even have DSLRs. We had, gosh, I think I shot my thesis film on DV cam, some sort of DV cam format. You know.
In a way, though,
so-
like, I think the issue with that today is like what happened to me is I got distracted by the
Yeah.
sexiness
Oh, yeah.
of the cameras.
Totally.
Which disables you. So like part of the reason, so I've done YouTube stuff like a lot throughout
Yeah.
my like life.
Hello and welcome to the Opus Collective.
Trying and failing and trying and failing. But it was never about the sexiness of the camera.
Right.
And that enabled me to learn how to tell better stories.
Yeah.
So in a way, and like people who just have GoPros or just have like smaller cameras and they can't focus on the sexy of the camera because they don't have the option.
Right.
In a way, I feel like they can benefit from that.
Yeah, exactly.
So
I mean,
do you feel
just-
like you did?
Yeah, absolutely. And when I was in film school, it wasn't even that long ago. I mean, this was the early 2000s. And, you know, our first projects we had to shoot on 16 millimeter cameras, edit on Steenbeck's
Wow.
reel to reel,
Yeah.
which my professors insisted would help us learn the value of our cuts, which I
Sounds
think
expensive.
is true. Yeah, it was expensive, although they were short.
Yeah.
You know, 3 minutes. And I can be very disparaging about quote unquote sexy cameras
Yeah.
in the classroom, and I always try not to be because I know that it is an entry point for some students.
It is a huge entry point.
But sometimes I just want to be like, oh, like, what are you actually filming? It looks beautiful, but
Yeah.
anyone can turn on a camera and make a beautiful image.
That's what I
Can you
realized,
actually
too.
tell a story?
Yeah, is
Can you
that-
actually connect with people?
Yeah, and I think especially now with social media, you see a lot of people who are great at like, even if you're good at like After Effects
Yeah.
and like making it look cool, but looking cool has gone so far as like people just don't really even like give it the time. Like it could be the coolest wave or coolest ski thing.
Yeah.
But if you don't understand the context,
Right.
especially like
What's really going
like if
on.
you watched a ski movie that was just like ski shot after ski shot and you're not like a pro, I mean actually you have skiing background so you could like get it, but just like the average person like
Yeah.
won't pay attention because
Yeah.
they don't know the story behind how gnarly
Right.
the skiing line is or something
Right,
like that.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah. That was part of what I loved about the film that you made in my class, though, was it did look visually beautiful. It had a lot of innovative editing techniques, narration, music. I mean, it was super experimental and innovative, which is really impressive.
Thank you.
But also, it had this, I thought, pretty poignant through line and subtext of kind of going on the journey and
Yeah.
what it means to be seeking something and an acceptance of not finding it, and then how gratifying it is when you get that surprise.
Oh my gosh.
Reward.
That was crazy.
No fucking way. I found them. Oh, what's up?
Because
was such a good
I had
film.
gone, well, all right, so just for context, I was in Professor Rubin's wildlife and what was it? Wildlife
Wildlife and environmental documentary filmmaking.
Yes, and
During the pandemic.
and I, you can go ahead.
Thanks.
Yeah. So I actually was lucky enough to have been in Steamboat, which is like my hometown. And there's tons of wildlife there if you know where to look. And so my idea was I wanted to show the process of like, because in a lot of the wildlife like videos and movies and things like that, it's hard to tell how hard it is to find these animals. And so
Yeah.
I was going to be like, I want to show the process behind that. And then that turned into me getting COVID And then the film was due in like 5 days, and we were
We hadn't
supposed to
seen
have
anything in
2
class.
rough cuts done,
Yeah.
and I hadn't shown anything.
Yeah.
And I was like, I am so screwed. Like, I don't know what I'm gonna do. I don't know if you remember this, but I was undeclared going into Chapman, and I wanted to go into the doc. I wanted to go into the doc program, and I was trying to get in, and then I met with you. And I don't know if you liked me, or I was in Doc 335 with
Kathy?
Kathy, yeah. And she was super cool, but
Yeah,
basically
she's great.
you helped me like get in, I think,
Uh-huh.
because you just gave me the information I needed, which I really appreciated. So I didn't want to let you down.
Oh.
And then I was like, okay, I need to go like full bore on this
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
And then
not
I just went 3 days like nonstop all
Right.
day.
Wow.
Like wake up at whatever to try and find the elk.
Yeah.
And I found them, well, no, it was like 4 or 5. I don't even know. But
Yeah.
I found the elk like relatively earlier than I thought I would.
Uh-huh.
And then it was all about like molding the story like around that.
Right. Right.
And then I figured it out.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was
it's
pretty
so
funny.
cool. The twist ending, and yeah, it was
And
just
yeah, I love how it was funny because I showed it to all of you guys.
Yeah.
And you're like, what a twist ending. And the twist was that I
We all-
actually found something.
right. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Right.
None
That was
of
the
you
twist.
thought I would.
I know.
Oh my gosh.
Especially because I think the rest of the class. I at least had seen a cut.
Yeah.
I think the rest of the class was like, oh my god! The first thing they saw was the completed film. With
Yeah.
The final screening.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
I really appreciate those classes though, and in some ways I even appreciated teaching during the pandemic just because it absolutely forced people to think outside the box.
Oh yeah.
The typical observational cinema verite filmmaking, the standard production practices just aren't going to work during COVID.
Yeah.
So people had to think. Quincy's film about
The
the
slugs,
slugs,
yeah.
and when would he have ever done that? You know?
People had to innovate
Yeah.
because
forced to innovate.
you're forced to. Yeah.
Especially when you're learning too and you're younger, it's so easy to do something that's derivative. We've all done that. You learn by mimicry,
Yeah.
but it's so nice when people can really, really step outside the box of the form and in fact, I'll show you Mama Has a Mustache, this 9-minute doc
Yeah. I'd love to see
that I've been working on. It's couldn't be more different from any of my last films,
Yeah.
which was what I wanted to do. I wanted to break from the survey essay style form that Hillbilly was. I wanted to break from the cinema verite form that Life on the Line
Yeah.
and Deep Down was. Before that, it was the reflexive form, which was The Last Mountain, and now it's a short animated doc.
Yeah.
So I think, you were asking me a little bit about my own work. When I reflect on it, and I just looking at the pattern, it was never deliberate. When I look at the pattern of my own work,
Yeah.
from film school until now, so from 2004 when I graduated, now it's almost 20 years later, I haven't really stuck with or stayed with one genre of doc, one form. I've always changed it up. And I think for me, that's where I find some of the excitement and newness and, sort of that spark that comes with trying a new form. The general themes are usually the same, which are people, American regions,
Coal.
studies of Appalachia, and then
Yeah.
Life on the Line, which was down on the border and is really about the Southwest. So obviously rural issues, those are close to my heart, but the form always changes. I think that's interesting.
Yeah. You talked about how students and a lot of documentarians get kind of stuck within a format.
Mm-hmm.
What are like the stereotypical like films that people make and that people get stuck into?
Like as far as getting kind of stuck or trapped into a set form.
Yeah, and I think you said people
Yeah.
copy because
Yeah.
they know it works,
Yeah.
and then I think students too, especially just because you don't know a lot. in the
Yeah,
beginning.
exactly. You have to start somewhere.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that quintessential format of, light cinema verite,
Yeah.
where there's not a lot happening in the scene and it's almost throwaway, intercut with sit-down interview bites. That's sort of the starting point.
Yeah,
And there's nothing wrong with that. You got to start somewhere. But I always hope, and I teach my students, and I certainly try to do this in my own work, to get to a place where the cinema verite that creates the foundation of a scene is substantial. Something's actually happening, something that is worth watching.
yeah,
Someone's not just sitting there cooking, you know, making quesadillas. Who cares? Unless it's literally a film about the culture that has that food as part of it, or
Yeah.
it's two people, it's a mother and a daughter, and they're talking about how cooking brings them together. You know, there has to be a reason to watch something. People are busy. If you're gonna ask people to watch a 10, 20, half an hour, hour-long movie, it better be good.
They need a reason,
you know?
yeah.
Yeah, so I think making that cinema verite, the foundational footage, more substantial, more relevant, more interesting is important. And then as far as the interviews that are intercut, you know, there's nothing wrong with interviews and bites. It lets us get into people's heads, but to try to have them interwoven in a way that is much more effective,
Yeah.
and move away from films that have interview bites as the foundation, and then the footage is just B-roll band-aids,
Yeah.
just slapping it into
B-roll
cover cuts.
band-aids. I like that.
That's like my worst fear,
Yeah.
and it is where a lot of people start. It's certainly where I started as a film student, but I try to get my students to move pretty quickly on from there.
How did you get out of it? And at what point did you feel like in your work and the films you've made, did you get out of it?
I think that probably my second semester in film school. I mean, I had some really, really amazing professors.
Yeah.
And they were the ones who helped me move from, you know, just trying to shoot just anything to having the verite be actually relevant
Yeah.
too. Although, you know, as I think about it, that second film I made in film school was called Cut. It
Yeah.
was about male teenage body image. I'm trying to think if I really did. I don't know. I think it's a process. You know, you sort of learn more and more, and I think as you get older, you care about issues that are more and more relevant. And
To society or you?
to society. I'm
Okay.
thinking about Deep Down was my first feature.
Yeah.
That's probably the first film I made that where I really had something to say,
Yeah.
like on a big picture level.
And was that
And-
because you were older and
Yeah, I was out in the world.
yeah.
I wasn't just learning the craft anymore. I was like being a citizen of society engaged in the world.
Yeah.
So that's another thing too. You know, we definitely try to get our students to that place as quickly as we can, which is why those travel courses are so awesome.
You talked about like seeing the world and being a citizen.
Yeah.
And I think it's hard to, I don't know if it's hard to, but it's easier to lend your perspective through a documentary film about people when you've met and seen a lot of people and seen like a lot of the world.
Right, exactly.
And I think a lot of people, a lot of documentarians, I think that's like part of the reason why I like doing this is to like
Yeah.
to meet more people and to get used to talking to people and having
Yeah.
a broader scope of people, because I think the more well versed you are with the varieties and the different types of people, the better of a voice you're going to have to
Yeah.
speak about them.
Right, you have to be engaged in the world in order to have something to say.
Yeah.
I remember my film professor saying to me when I was in film school, you know, subscribe to the New York Times, you know, become a member of various organizations, but yeah, get out of your isolated shell
Yeah.
and engage.
And that's been hard with COVID,
Yeah,
especially.
right, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, in fact, a lot of our thesis films this year were reflexive and personal films.
Yeah.
People sort of looking inward, looking at their lives. People couldn't go out and make the cinema verite, observational films. And in some ways, these projects are better.
Really?
Yeah, because they're just more introspective out of necessity.
You made The Last Mountain, which was a film about your dad.
Uh-huh.
And when you were, how old were you? Were you out of college by then?
Yeah, that was my film school thesis film.
Okay.
That was 2004.
And was that
so I
something
was-
you knew that you wanted to do from the get-go? That you wanted to tell that story about your father, but you wanted to be like prepared enough to do it?
I had wanted to, between the time that my dad died and the time that the film came out was about 10 years,
Okay.
9 years, and I had always wanted to do something. You know, as a filmmaker, I knew that there was a story there because there was so much mystery behind
Yeah.
how he died. But I didn't know how or when. And during my second year of film school, when it was time to develop our thesis films, I was making a film. I really wanted to be partying in SF. And so I started making a film about the female and Filipino roots of turntablism and
Oh.
hip hop.
Oh, wow.
So it was about female DJs
Yeah.
and MCs and
San Francisco?
turntablists in San Francisco and Oakland. It was actually really, really cool. I think it would have been a great film.
But
But I was driving home from my friend's house one night in Berkeley, from Berkeley to Palo Alto, and I went around a corner a little too fast, was late, and I totaled my car.
really,
Yeah, and I was completely fine, but the car wasn't, and it gave me a
freaked you out a
real
little
wake-up
bit?
call.
Oh yeah.
I was like, you know what? This is my thesis film. I get one shot, so I'm gonna do the film that matters,
Yeah.
not the fun partying film. I'm gonna do the one that I've been wanting to make, that I've been scared to make.
Yeah. Do you think that those like events that happen in your life are almost like, I don't know if good is the right word, but it like it reignites and reestablishes
Yeah,
your direction, because you realize, like you said, what matters.
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah, definitely. It just reshuffles and organizes your priorities in a way that, yeah, is much more authentic.
Yeah.
So yeah, then I made The Last Mountain, and I was so glad I did. It was hard though.
Yeah.
I mean, emotionally, to go back, dig up all that stuff. It hadn't been that long.
In the box and the farm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you talked about, she talks about in the film how since your dad died, you hadn't looked in the box about
Yeah.
like the evidence and
Yeah.
all the reports and stuff like that.
Right, it had just been kind of socked away
Yeah.
in the basement for 10 years. And then I literally opened it up
Yeah.
for the movie.
And did you get a sort of like release from making that film? Like
Yeah.
closing kind of?
I think I did, and my family did.
Okay.
And I got a sense of sort of finding my voice within my family. Again, using documentary, I think I had always used documentary as a tool to open up conversation when I didn't feel that I could in other ways. And that's definitely what The Last Mountain was.
Okay. And then, so from there you made Deep Down, which was your first feature, but there was 6 years in between that. And you were at
Yeah.
you were at grad school at Stanford, so like what did you do
Yeah.
in that transition, like between The Last Mountain and Deep Down is very significant.
Right.
As far as scale
Right.
and production and people and just like all things involved.
Yeah.
So how did you make that transition? And what did you do over those 6 years?
Yeah, that's a good question, because I think that transition's in some way kind of the hardest part of launching a documentary career.
Yeah.
When you're in film school, you have financial support and colleagues and gear and everything you need.
You're all set
Due
up.
dates, deadlines.
Yeah.
You're gonna be productive because you have to be. Then after that, you know, for me, I got a job. I was working, doing a little bit of editing. I had kind of taken to editing in The Last Mountain.
Yeah.
And then I got a job working in distribution on a documentary. And on that doc, I started to get more interested again in editing. I remember going up to Lucasfilm up in Marin County,
Yeah.
walking through the hallways there. We were just sort of doing a tour and seeing the editors in these like closed dark rooms.
Yeah.
Totally left alone, being creative.
Yeah.
I knew they got paid well. So yeah, I got more and more interested in that, and then I started to pick up assistant editing gigs. So I started to do some editing, decided that I wanted to be an editor, not a sort of high-level administrative assistant, associate producer, even producer. I really wanted to be the one putting together the story. So for about 2 years, 3 years, I just sort of worked professionally. And then I got a gig in LA. It was basically what you'd think of as sort of my big break.
Yeah.
Editing Iraq for Sale, which was a film by Robert Greenwald. And I got a job co-editing that. And that was a big deal. It was a theatrical release.
Okay.
He was a pretty big filmmaker at the time. And after that, I started to get jobs editing feature docs. And right at the same time, that was 2006, I moved to LA.
Okay. From the East Coast?
From SF.
Oh,
I
from
had been in
SF,
SF,
okay.
yeah. And right at that time, so spring of 2007, so about 2.5 years after graduating film school, I reached out to someone I had met in San Francisco to see if she wanted to make Deep Down. And that was when we started making that. It took 3 years.
To film?
But we started
Or-
it in 2007.
Okay.
Film, track the story, fundraise. We ended up raising over $200,000. And
Wow.
I was just like right out of film school. What did I know about raising money?
Yeah.
You know? So it didn't come out until 2009, but we worked on it for a good 3 years. But yeah, I would say after I graduated, before I started my first feature, there were about 2 years where I was just kind of getting the lay of the land, figuring out what it really meant to work in the industry.
Yeah.
And what I liked to do and what I didn't like to do.
I'll go down here.
Oh, great. Yeah, you're so much taller than me.
And so then, yeah, what did you take away from making like your big first feature? And how do you take that momentum into starting? Because then you kind
Yeah.
of just went off from there.
Yeah, once I had that, I was good to go. I think I really learned, one of the things you don't really learn in film school, even here at Chapman, although we try, is really fundraising, proposal writing. You know, you guys, you have to write proposals for your classes, but
Yeah.
you don't really need money. You
Well-
know, you have gear, you have
The
time, you
assets.
have personnel, yeah.
And it's funny because I think a lot of students take that part for granted because it's not sexy. It's the same like
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
when you learn like, oh, like I need to get waivers and stuff from
Right.
people.
Yeah.
And you're just like, yeah, whatever. Like,
Yeah.
That's not like show me the sexy stuff. But in reality, that's like how you are
Yeah.
enabled to be able to even create things
Right.
that are cool.
Exactly.
Uh,
So in some ways, that was I learned that with Deep Down because
Yeah.
we had to raise so much money. So I learned how to create proposals and write all of those elements that we needed to generate. And then I also would say I learned that a film can be so much more than just a standalone piece.
Yeah.
It can be a movement. It can be a whole activist campaign. It can really truly stimulate conversation and political action and you know,
Culture.
yeah. So that was really inspiring for me. And then, you know, shortly after that, my editing career was sort of starting to take off. As a filmmaker, I was starting to be known and had an easier time getting grants. And then this job opened up teaching at Chapman,
Yeah.
which I never thought I would do
Be a
so
teacher.
early in my career. I always knew I'd do it later.
Because you started when you were like 20 years ago. Right?
Young, like 31.
Wow,
I'm
okay.
43 now.
Yeah.
So yeah, the job opened up at Chapman. I almost didn't take it.
What was the fact that your dad was a professor?
Yeah.
Was that a big motivator or not as much?
Yeah, and I've always loved to, I was a camp counselor and
Yeah.
always loved to work with young people and teach, and I knew that I would love teaching, love the lifestyle. I just never knew I would start so early.
Yeah.
And my fear was that I would start teaching and I wouldn't make any more films.
True.
So I did start teaching. I got addicted to the lifestyle.
Which was?
Both summers off, but also working with young people, helping them create their films.
Yeah.
You know, all of that generation. I mean, it's totally creative. It's never boring or rote for me.
Yeah.
And realizing I actually could keep making my films, and in fact, it might even be easier
Yeah.
because I have a stable paycheck.
And time off.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally, and a job that totally supports my creative work. So here I am. Now I have no desire at all to leave my job. I love it.
Really?
Yeah,
That's awesome.
yeah,
Good for you. That's great that you found something unexpected
yeah.
and then that turned out to be something that you don't want to leave.
Yeah.
You just enjoy doing.
I think a lot of people, a lot of filmmakers, people my age especially, who are getting houses and having kids, you know, they sort of see teaching as being the holy grail of
Yeah.
what they would want, because you do have the steady paycheck and yet you can keep making your creative work. That at the end of the day, not that many people really like to teach, like
What-
the teaching
yeah.
part, the in the classroom part.
What does that entail and what did you not expect?
I
like,
didn't.
going into it.
It took me a little while to get used to what it would be like to be working with student films, which are, you know, students
work
are
in
learning.
progress.
Yeah, they're work in progress, and not be dulled down creatively myself
Yeah.
by sometimes spending the day looking at really rough material.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how I was in film school. You can't expect students to be professionals.
Yeah.
But I think you have to kind of learn how to, and then also how to be invested in students' projects without thinking they're your own,
Oh.
you know, because,
Wow, that's interesting.
and you have to have your own creative projects, or I think you do get overly invested, and then if a student doesn't make a note that you've suggested or something like
Then you
that,
get
you can get
frustrated.
almost offended or frustrated. Yeah, you have to be able to let go.
Okay.
But once I had mastered those things, which was a couple years,
Yeah.
then since
felt
then I've been,
comfortable and-
yeah, totally.
Yeah. So then what are your goals then? Because you love this job and you're going to keep it.
Yeah.
So do you want to keep making docs and doing new things and like
Yeah.
just doing that balance, you think?
Yeah.
That's kind of your goal
Yeah, and
with it?
becoming, long term, becoming a better filmmaker. One of the things about teaching is it slows you down.
Creatively?
You can keep making your work, but it takes longer. I only have so many hours in the day.
Yeah.
So things take longer. And yeah, I see other people who are only documentary filmmakers. Sometimes I envy them, but for me to have like my creative work be based on, and like my own sense of self be based on the effectiveness of grants and have to be using my films to support myself, I think that would make me too anxious. I don't think it would lend itself to my creative,
And it can ruin that
juices.
process because it
Yeah, exactly.
it puts financial pressures on something that
Yeah.
shouldn't. Like you can make the film so it appeals more commercially and less
Yeah.
is of an art form.
Exactly.
And I think a lot of people get stuck up in that, especially like making videos like on the internet.
Yeah.
Is like, okay, how do I find the balance where I make this commercially appealing to sponsors
Yeah.
or to people who want to fund it,
Yeah.
but also like true to what I want it to be.
Right. Yeah.
I think that's definitely a hard
Yeah.
balance.
But yeah, it's also part of why I do all these travel courses, going all over, community voices, America stories, global stories. I always like to keep the newness and innovation in my teaching too, or I would get kind of dulled down.
Yeah. So yeah, what else is there left to do for you? What's next? What's the future?
I'm ready to start a feature after Hillbilly,
Okay.
which took us 4.5 years.
Wow.
We raised $500,000. It was such a mammoth project.
Yeah.
It was the biggest film I'd ever made by far, in every sense of the word. I was ready for a short, bite-sized, funny piece.
Which is
That's
what you
Mama Has a
made.
Mustache.
Yeah,
So that's now going to be coming out very soon. And yeah, I'm ready for a feature. I don't know what, but I know I'm ready for it.
Do you have any last words for the people out there?
No, just to, for you as a student, just to enjoy the process of learning the craft, the trade. Don't feel like you have to have all the answers. What will keep you in the field of nonfiction over the long term is, like I try to do with my teaching, figuring out a way to maintain that freshness, newness, innovation, always keep learning.
Yeah.
I remember Michael Apted. Michael Apted, right? The great Hollywood filmmaker. He made all the Up series, but he's also made tons. He made James Bond movies. I mean, he's kind of done it all. He made Nell, Coal Miner's Daughter.
Yeah.
He moderated our Q&A at our Santa Monica theatrical screening for Hillbilly. And I remember him saying, like, if you're constantly learning while you're making a film, that freshness and newness will show up in the footage.
Yeah.
If you already have all the answers when you start a film, it's going to feel like that. It will feel less dynamic.
Yeah.
So that really stuck with me. Like, take on something that maybe you don't know that much about.
Do something new.
Yeah, just do something new, like this or like your film. Yeah. So
Cool.
that's all.
Well, thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Yeah.
Bye-bye.